What's up, everyone? It's Karthik with MoneyVest. So congratulations to all Palantir shareholders. Palantir finally made it into the S&P 500. The inclusion is official. According to the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones indices, they announced this on Friday after the markets closed on September 6th, where the Palantir stock is going to be making its way into the S&P 500. It's a pretty big deal. In this video, I've got a couple spreadsheets I want to break down for all of you. Performance and also what is going to be the expected percentage change in the S&P 500's Palantir stock, because there's a market cap weighting here, which I'll go over. As always, make sure that you drop a like and, of course, subscribe to the channel. If you're just joining us for the first time, I would really appreciate that, and share this video with your fellow Palantir investors and traders that can learn a little bit more about what this means for the stock moving forward. So lots to break down. Congratulations again, and this right here is the catalyst, and all I'm asking in return is that you share this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So Palantir Technologies, Dell Technologies, and Erie Indemnity set to join S&P 500, others to join S&P Mid Cap 400 and S&P Small Cap 600. So this again was on September 6th, 2024, and Palantir will be added to the S&P 500 and will be effective prior to the opening of trading on Monday, September 23rd. So that's usually how it happens. It takes about a couple weeks for these changes to fully be in effect, and Palantir will be replacing American Airlines group in S&P 500. It's a pretty big deal because it really just is going to be a lot of exposure for Palantir, not only from a literal standpoint, because a lot of funds tracking the S&P 500 would have to include Palantir as part of their portfolio, as part of their fund, but also exposure in terms of just S&P 500 being the most liquid and most heavily traded index in the world, right? So the top 500 companies, it's actually a pretty significant privilege and pretty much a thing of prestige to be in one of, if not the most important index in the world, right? That's the S&P 500. I mean, S&P 500 is the most tracked index in the entire world, right? It's not a European index. It's not the index over in India. It is really the S&P 500 that's being tracked all over the world to really understand the health of the 500 largest publicly traded companies over in the US. Now, when it comes to the criteria and what it takes to be included in the S&P 500, first of all, the market cap has to be over $8.2 billion. So that is the minimum market threshold for any company to be considered to be added in the S&P 500. And it has to be structured as a corporation based in the US, and also with a common stock in capitalization, listed on eligible U.S. exchanges. So we're talking New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. And most importantly, which Palantir did not have for a very long time, and even Tesla did not have for a very long time, it is profitability, right? Positive consecutive quarters of profitability. So positive reported earnings in most recent quarter and on a trailing 12-month basis, the sum of the most recent historical 4 quarters. And Palantir achieved that. So if you come over to our MoneyVest platform, you'll notice that this right here is the profitability for Palantir. If you come over to, let's say, the last 12 quarters, you'll notice that they actually made that switch on December 31st quarter in 2022. So they actually went through an entire 2 years of profitability, and they are still growing very well, right? So this was the last quarter that we just got numbers for, and I did a whole video on, the earnings call. Alex Karp, the best days are not behind us, they're in front of us. A lot of really confidence coming in from the CEO, and again, the all of numbers coming in incredibly strong. And this right here was the net income over 135 million. So it was very much speculated that the rebalancing for S&P 500, there's a huge possibility that Palantir is going to get included in the S&P 500. And we finally got that announcement. And this right here is the consistent quarter-over-quarter growth in profitability. So a company, again, coming in with some very nice numbers. Now, when it comes to the total profitable shares, 82% right now is the total profitable shares with an average cost basis of $26.54. So we do have majority of investors currently profitable on Palantir. And after hours, Palantir was up over 7%. So if you come over to Palantir stock over here on the 4-hour time frame, Palantir was up a little bit over 4% after hours. So this right here, actually 7.7% after hours. So this right here was the entire green candle after the announcement from S&P 500. So basically Dow Jones indices suggesting for the inclusion in the index. So I'm assuming there's going to be a lot more investors. Pretty much everybody is going to be green on Monday on Palantir, considering a 7.5% rally. And the average cost basis, of course, sitting at $26.54, puts us, in my opinion, I think most of investors profitable and back in the green for Palantir. We're kind of coming up to that resistance once again at $32, $33 per share. And all-time highs, of course, sit well over $45 per share for Palantir, which I think is going to be only a matter of time. I've got a price target of $40 on Palantir by the end of this year. We'll see if we actually get up to that level or not. And this right here has been institutional involvement. And what you'll notice is that we really started to see a lot of institutional acceleration in terms of ownership post December quarter of 2022. So if you come over to this right here, I've mentioned this time and time again that institutions care very much about profitability. They want companies growing their bottom line, their earnings. That's what really matters to them. And as Palantir became profitable and it's consistently growing numbers here on a quarter over quarter and year over year basis, we of course saw significant increase in the overall institutional ownership for Palantir. So this has been, as of 2022, pretty much the last quarter, you've seen that acceleration. And it's only going to accelerate further because of the involvement of Palantir being part of the S&P 500. So what I've done here, as you already know, this is my entire spreadsheet for market concentration in the S&P 500. So I've got all the 500 companies that are part of the S&P 500 over here. I'll have to take off American Airlines, Etsy. Some of those companies have to come off of this spreadsheet, and Palantir and Dell need to be included. So not only hedge funds and institutional managers are rebalancing, I also have to make some adjustments to the spreadsheet now. But if you take a look at the market cap for S&P 500, we're sitting at just under $48 trillion as of Friday's sell-off, which was a little bit over $845 billion, right? So pretty significant sell-off in the market, $47.9 trillion. And Palantir market cap right now sits at $68 billion, right? So just under 68 billion. So that is going to be a market cap weighting of a grand total of 0.14%. So I know, very, very small in terms of its influence on the S&P 500. So it's kind of like a small fish in a very, very large pond. Basically because the top 7, which is Tesla, we're talking Apple and Microsoft and Nvidia, like those are behemoths when it comes to the overall market cap weighting. But Palantir inclusion, its first step, influence-wise, very, very small at 0.14%. Now, I did a very quick research and also did ask Meta AI, so take it with a grain of salt, please, because these numbers are not accurate. I essentially asked how many hedge funds or assets under management are there for S&P 500 ETFs and index funds, right? What is the AUM, assets under management, for all S&P 500 tracking funds and ETFs? And we got an answer, $4.5 to $5.5 trillion is that number. I was kind of estimating it to be somewhere between $2 to $3 trillion, but that is just for index funds, and then ETF adds on another $1.5 to $2 trillion. And all of this funds need to buy Palantir to rebalance, right? And make it, once again, as close to the S&P 500 as possible, because there's a lot of index funds and ETFs that are tracking the S&P 500. They need to make that adjustment if the index itself is making that adjustment, right? So if index is adding Palantir, these funds, these ETFs, these index funds also need to make that adjustment in order to track the S&P 500 really well. And we've got $5.5 trillion. And very simply, all you have to do is just essentially take into account the market cap weighting of 0.14%, multiply with the total assets under management from all these ETFs and index funds of 4.5 trillion, and we're looking at $6.3 billion worth of buying, right, that these ETFs and index funds have to do in order to include Palantir as part of their funds, right, in order to track the S&P 500. So hope that makes sense. And that is going to represent a move of about 9.3, 9.4%. So 6.7 divided by the overall market cap, we get a 9.3% move. And we already did see, I think, a little bit over 7.7% move in Palantir stock after hours, after the announcement came out. So that is probably big money buying it and including it in the funds so that they can actually track the S&P 500 on a more closely basis, because that's literally what they're intended to track. Now, again, these numbers are pretty rough estimates, so I'm not going to say that these are exactly accurate. If we're looking at 4 trillion, that's an 8.3% move. If we're looking at 5 trillion, that is a 10% move. So, 7 to 10% is what I would assume to be a reasonable move after this announcement. And but that's exactly what we got, 7.7% move for Palantir at the moment. Again, this is to give you a little bit of a rough estimate, rough idea of how much Palantir would be expected to move, given that there is assets under management tracking the S&P 500 funds of about $4 or $5 trillion, and given the Palantir's market cap and of course the market cap weighting within the S&P 500. So it gives you a little bit of a rough idea. Now, I also wanted to go over the performance, and this right here is a spreadsheet that I wanted to create and go over the past inclusions, basically only going back as far as 2023, 2024. There's one company, 2022, that's CoStar Group, and of course Tesla wanted to include that as well, 2020. And this is the performance on the day of the announcement. This is after hours or the next day after the announcement came out. 1 month performance, 1 year performance, and this is the difference between the 1 year and the 1 day. Are we higher or lower after the announcement came out? Now, I'm sure there's other factors. There's a lot of other factors at play. The company's actual performance, the company's specific catalyst, all those things. But this is just to give you a bit of an idea of whether inclusions act as a bullish or a bearish catalyst. Now, on the day of the announcement, or the day after the announcement, I should say, 100% of the times stocks go up. You've got KKR. This is the announcement date. This is when the announcement actually came out. This is not the day of the inclusion. So, for example, Palantir is going to be included in the S&P 500 on September 23rd, but this is the announcement date, which is September 6th. So when the announcement comes out, the cat's already out of the bag, and the market's going to react accordingly, and 100% of the times, stocks are higher. KKR, CrowdStrike, GoDaddy, Uber, Supermicrocomputer, CoStar Group, Palo Alto Network, Palantir, and Tesla. Pretty much every single stock here is up by an average of 7 to 8%. And of course, market cap weightings and the institutional funds and whatnot is going to be different. So we're not going to take a look at the average move because that's going to be different for every stock. But the idea here is what percentage of the times this has acted as a bullish catalyst, and that's 100% of the times stocks have been higher. Now, 1 month later, 100%, we are either flat or higher. However, 1 month later, the moves are not the same. 1 month later, the difference has been practically nothing for KKR. CrowdStrike was in fact down from after the announcement came out. So on the day of the announcement or after 1 day, it was up 7.2%, but then it actually sold off and it was only up 1.82% after the announcement. GoDaddy only up 1%, pretty much comparable to the same level from back 1 day. We got Uber flat. We got SMCI up 5%. It was up 18%. After the announcement, and essentially sold off throughout the course of the month here and was only up 5%. Then we got CoStar Group, 7% on the day of, and then 6% 1 month later. Palo Alto Network, perhaps the only stock, and Tesla, perhaps the only two stocks that were up after the announcement, and 1 month later, they were significantly higher. Palo Alto up 18.5%, and Tesla just ripped. We remember that 2020 rally. Tesla was up 62% 1 month later after the inclusion. I think that has a lot to do with the short squeeze as well, because we had a big battle as investors were shorting the stock and there was inclusion in the S&P 500. So lots of investors and institutional funds, ETFs and hedge index funds buying while the shorts covering, and that created a big squeeze for the stock price to move higher. Now, 1 year later is when the probabilities drop off. 75% of the times, stocks are higher after the announcement. 1 year after the announcement for the stocks to be higher. And this right here, I think, is a more telling point because this is the performance 1 year later versus 1 day. And what you'll notice is KKR down 4.5%, between 1 year and 1 day, meaning that it was up 11%. Right? But when the announcement came out, but then only up 6.6% 1 year later after the announcement. So it's actually dropped off by 4.5%. CrowdStrike, of course, it's got its own reasons with the IT outage, and you can make a case that CrowdStrike definitely is under a lot of pressure, down almost 40%. 1 year later, this is not 1 year, by the way, this is just year to date because a lot of these companies have been added in 2024 or 2023. So we don't really have the entire 1 year. So this is really looking into account where the prices are today versus when the first announcement came out for the inclusion. So CrowdStrike down almost 40%, GoDaddy and Uber 4.6 and 19% for Uber. So that is actually one of the best ones. It's actually higher 1 year later. SMCI down 76%, right? So SMCI added in 2024, just absolutely getting crushed so far, down significantly from its all-time highs. CoStar 1.7%, Palo Alto and Tesla once again doing really well, even after 1 year. 50% for Palo Alto, and Tesla is still up 46% from its lows from back in 2020. November 16, 2020 is when the announcement came out. So the probability, 63%. you can see that it drops off as time goes on because this catalyst tends to fade over time and the company specific catalyst basically takes over. So this is really just a short-term bullish catalyst for individual stocks, and then over time it starts to kind of fade as company specific news and catalyst and performance essentially takes over. But nonetheless, I mean, this is still a huge accomplishment for Palantir, something that, you know, investors a couple of years ago did not even expect, where it was not even on the radar because Palantir was not profitable. There was so much debate, so much hate around this stock here because of the lack of profitability. You know, it's overvalued and shares outstanding are crazy. I mean, the investors are diluting shares left and right, but as we know, the Palantir's turned the corner towards profitability, done incredibly well in the last several quarters here, increasing revenues. You can also plot for revenues here, plot for gross profit, and you can take a look how consistently the company's been growing revenues, very high margins, getting more contracts, expansion and extension of those contracts, and profitability also doing incredibly well. That being said, I think it's really important for us to also understand the valuation is still high. You know, the Palantir trades at well over 60, 70 times earnings, or closer to 100 times earnings, and not to mention the price to sales multiple also incredibly high because revenue-wise, last year 2.2 billion, and now it's going to be trading at almost 70 billion, so that's well over 30, 35 times sales multiple, which is again very high. You can also do some analysis on a case-by-case basis. You can take a look at the bear case, base case, bull case. Right now it's not showing up. We're going to have to take a look. Let's just come over to revenue. There we go. So you can actually do a price to sales multiple or even net income basis. You can take a look for, let's say, the next 5 years. Right now, we don't have the last 5 years worth of data, which is why it's not coming up. But we can always take a look at the revenue, operating margins, operating cash flow might be there. So let's take a look. It's not there either. EBITDA, not there because the company doesn't have that much data available to us because it's just recently turned profitable. So you can do your analysis over here as well to better understand what is the appropriate value for Palantir. For me, I've already mentioned, I think $20 is going to be something that I'm going to be more interested in. So coming over to the technical breakdown here, on the daily, this right here was a very strong support at $29.30. And of course, after hours, we're seeing a very nice move higher on this catalyst, and resistance is going to stay put at $32, $33, with of course the all-time high sitting well over $45 per share for Palantir. So hope you all enjoy this video and a complete update on this stock. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and what are you expecting from Palantir moving forward. As always, make sure that you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Again, links to our Discord and Patreon is going to be down below. Happy investing. I'll see you all in the next video.